Hello, this is Frank of the 12 Gates. I've had a stinking cold for the last couple of days. That's why this video is... I'll try to get them out on Tuesday, but with the Easter period coming up, it's going to be a bit all over the shop. So you wouldn't have understood what I was saying. I'm still a bit bunged up now, but I feel a bit better, a bit more with it. This video, we're going to be looking at Iraq in Bible prophecy. What role does it have to play? That sort of thing. And what we're going to look at is we're going to look at basically a quick look at the history of the place, and then we're going to go on to the current headlines that are emerging out of there and how do they, over the last 20 years really, and see how powerful a place it is when it comes to Bible prophecy. And we just see what role it's got to play. Similar to the other videos, this is a follow-on from the previous video, which was to do with Syria. So the history of Iraq. Iraq, some people say, is mentioned in Genesis 2. Yeah, there's a Bible verse that mentions Eden is to the east. And some people say that all compass points go from Israel and Jerusalem. And to the east is, well, you've got Lebanon, but also you've got Iraq. And that is something that people say it was based in the Persian Gulf area, the bottom end of the very narrow part at the bottom of, if you look at the map, round about that area. But recent evidence is moving more towards Turkey, that sort of thing. They're saying that the topography changed after the flood, and the actual where the rivers are now is not necessarily where the rivers were before the flood. So, because the river Euphrates is mentioned, there's 4 rivers, isn't there? Excuse me while I have a drink. A cuppa, as we say here in the UK. So there's that. The next thing is Abraham. He was from Ur, which is again in the area where some people say the Garden of Eden originated. And he was from there. And Ur is mentioned. The Bible quote says, Abraham from Ur of the Chaldeans, or of Chaldea. Yeah. When you go into the Bible prophecy, or not, where you go into the Old Testament, the names that were used for the area that is occupied now by Iraq would be Assyria, which is more to the northeast, takes in part of the Medes, and also Babylonia, and also Shinar is another name that's mentioned. That was pretty much where the Tower of Babel was built, and it is mentioned. Shinar, and I think Chaldea is mentioned as well. So if you take all those areas, Chaldea is to the south, Shinar is the sort of middle part of Iraq, and then you've got Assyria to the north. Babylonia is pretty much the empire, isn't it? And also, there is the general area of the Middle East back then was called Mesopotamia. So that's another word that comes up in the Bible. So you've got Mesopotamia, the Chaldeans, Assyrians, and Shinar, and also you could say the Medes as well. Now, when you get into the history of where Iraq is now, the Assyrians are mentioned many times, and so are the Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar, he took over Jerusalem, didn't he? And also many of the Assyrian kings, there was a number of them, they were turned against Israel when they strayed, when they erred and went to the groves and the high places and started worshipping idols and that sort of thing. And the Lord got angry with them, and he put it in the heart of these neighbouring countries. Well, they're one country away, aren't they? But they were, at the time, they were neighbouring. And they went and they conquered Jerusalem repeatedly, wasn't it? A number of times, as a punishment, as a judgment. So there's a lot of history tied up with Iraq, that area. There's a lot of, because that area, I would say, they call it the cradle of civilization, and also it is a hotbed for paganism and worshipping of idols, idolatry, isn't it? Yeah, basically the alternative religious system to the Jewish faith at the time, isn't it? What the children of Israel, they were supposed to worship a living God, which they had dealings with and knew that existed, but no, they went back to the ones that are carved from stone and wood and all the rest of it, and worship them instead, isn't it? So Iraq is mentioned many times. And also, I think, when you get into it, Iraq is, in the names that I mentioned, like, you know, the Chaldeans, the Assyrians, Babylonia, the Medes, all these names, Mesopotamia, they were all mentioned. The number of times they are mentioned is only second to Israel. The Bible is pretty much Israel, isn't it? But Iraq and the countries that were there at the time is number two. Yeah. And also the number of dealings that Israel had with that country is probably one of the major ones. Yeah. When it comes down to the Old Testament. And also Iraq is mentioned in its old country forms, also in the New Testament as well. It's mentioned in Acts, and it's mentioned by Matthew. So it is a very important part of the Bible jigsaw puzzle, and it plays an important role in end times prophecy. And we'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at the recent headlines. I'd say the recent headlines over the last 20 years, and we'll see what is emerging from that country over that time period, and is any of it prophetic? And I think you'll be shocked. So we've looked at the history of Iraq and how it fits in, you know, sort of its place in the Old Testament. What we're going to do now is look at four things. We're going to look at one of the major things that happened, and is it prophetic? And that was the Iraq War that happened way back sort of the early 2000s. And also we're going to look at Nineveh, which is mentioned in the Bible. That is in northern Iraq. And then we're going to look at the Medes, which are mentioned in the Bible, and they are in the sort of northern Iraq area as well, and other parts of the Middle East. And then finally we're going to be looking at Mystery Babylon, whether Iraq could be the home to Mystery Babylon. So let's start off firstly with the Iraq War. Let's get that out of the way. A lot of strong views on this. I've got some dramatic pictures here which spark some very painful memories for some people, but it's something we have to go into because there is a connection between, you know, Iraq and America. Before that, there was the 9/11 bombings, and what I'm going to do is look at, was the Iraq War, shock and awe, initiated by George W. Bush, was it prophetic, and what was it all about? You know, nobody knows the answer, do they? We know it wasn't for the weapons of mass destruction because they never found any, did they? So it wasn't for that. Was it for the oil that's in Iraq? Yes, they have oil, but I mean, at the end of the day, I've seen the numbers. They only supply about 10% of the oil to the US, so it's not a big problem such as with, say, Saudi Arabia. If there was problems there, then they do. Things have changed since then, haven't they? America's got its own, it's doing fracking and all the rest of it, and it's getting oil and gas by different means now, isn't it? But so it's not that either. Was it the fear of a dictator, like something like Hitler rising up again and he's going to take over the world? Yeah, it could have been that, but a lot of people are saying it was to do with Al-Qaeda in that area, and that was the main reason, and it was, you could say, a retaliation for the 9/11 bombings, isn't it? But it was a delayed effect, you could say. But there's a lot of sort of speculation. Should we've actually pulled out of there? I say we because the UK was involved and I'm based in the UK. But there's a lot of debate over this, isn't there? But what I'm trying to say is this prophetic? Was this prophecy? And this is where the debate comes in. At the time, probably people saw that, they saw the headlines and thought, yeah, this is Bible prophecy, this is the Third World War and all the rest of it. But it never did. It was very quick and short and sharp, wasn't it? So it never did materialise into a Third World War where all the countries are getting sucked in. Potentially they could have done. But it was so short and sharp that it never really went beyond. And they found him, and he was deposed, wasn't he? And I think he was hanged in the end, wasn't he? But was it prophetic? That's the thing. I really honestly don't think it was. And the thing is, this is the thing with prophecy. If you look at the end times prophecy, the nations in the Middle East, they're all involved with the end times prophecy as mentioned in Revelation and mentioned in Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. It goes on, doesn't it? They're all mentioned in there. They've all got a role to play. And around the globe, all the countries, the big nations like China, Russia and America, they've all got Japan, Europe, all the big players, they've all got something, Russia, they've all got roles to play. I personally think the real reason was they did see something like Bible prophecy unfolding there, and America stepped in to try and stop it from happening. And this is the problem. Some people's, they say that George W. Bush wasn't an evangelical Christian. That's up for debate, isn't it? But I mean, interfering in Bible prophecy and trying to change it, you're just going to get sucked in yourself. If the Lord has got this planned, then this thing that's going to happen, this end time scenario, you can't stop it. There's no nation on this earth that's powerful enough to stop this thing. Yeah, and all he can do is, what happened was they deposed the dictator and they set up a democracy there, and what's appeared instead? ISIS. And we'll be coming on to that. ISIS and Daesh emerged from that, didn't it? So you get rid of one problem and you create something else, isn't it? So was it prophetic? It was a prophetic, I'd say, a Bible prophecy interference by a superpower, but you can't compete with the Lord. At the end of the day, if that prophecy is going to go through, it's going to go through in the order that it's going to go through, and there's nothing you can do to stop it at all. That's the first thing. The second thing is, in Iraq, there is a place called Nineveh, yeah? And that is in northern Iraq. It doesn't really exist anymore. It's now basically, I think it's on the east bank of the Tigris River, and it's right next door to Mosul. Mosul, the town, I think it's on the other side of the river, but Nineveh would be on the east side of the river, and it is effectively part of Mosul. So what has been happening in Mosul? We have seen headlines coming out of there where ISIS have been running rampant. There's been a lot of problems there, and Christians have been persecuted, churches have been torn down. There's all sorts of things have been going on. The headlines that are there, 125,000, I've seen headlines somewhere else, 200,000 Christians have pretty much left the area, and they just go and disperse to other parts, maybe neighbouring countries, Lebanon or something like that, or maybe they've got even further afield, like Australia and Europe and things like that. So that has been going on, and there is mention of Nineveh by various prophets. Nahum is one, and also I think it's mentioned by Ezekiel and one of the other major prophets as well. And this prophecy, apparently, the Nineveh prophecy, has been fulfilled. But what we are seeing is, with this mass exodus of Christians that took place around about 2014, 2015, they're saying they're starting to come back now in late 2017, 2018, the headlines are appearing. And I think they had their first mass, I think it was Christmas last year or something like that. But that, to me, is an omen that something is about to kick off in that area. Yeah, forgetting ISIS, I mean, that's a separate video altogether, what their role is in Bible prophecy. The next thing after that is, so Nineveh is important. It's another one. It's basically, if you see Nineveh, you read Mosul, and there's a lot of history. That was the capital of Assyria. That was the capital city. Yeah, I mean, as we know, as you saw in the previous history, Assyria's got very strong ties with rampaging Israel, basically, isn't it? The next thing we're going to look at is, this is number 3 in the prophetic implications list, and that is the Medes. The Medes were based in sort of Iraq, but maybe in nature, I can't even say it. They were in sort of the next door countries, northern Iraq, Iran, northern Iran, that sort of area, and northern parts of Syria as well, I say, and also parts of Turkey. The Medes, many people say that the Medes are basically what we see today is the Kurds, and what we're seeing with the Kurds, if they are descended from the Medes, and some people would say they are direct descendants, there is a genetic link there. And again, there is mention of the Medes in prophecy a number of times. So it's something you want to keep an eye on. And this is another thing that's it's unfolding. I'm seeing this now, the headline. I put this on the last video I did, which is Syria in Bible prophecy. And we've seen Erdogan and the Turkish army are going into northern Syria, and they are taking on the Kurdish in northern Syria. Yeah, there's conflicts going on there. Now, the latest headline I've just seen, it's just come out, is Erdogan is now in northern Iraq as well and taking on the Kurds there. Now, Iraq see this move and they realise what they're doing. They're coming into Iraq and they're fighting the battle that they've been fighting for some time with the Kurds, but it's on their soil, isn't it? And they are starting to react, and these headlines, they're starting to think about, well, hang on a minute, this is like a sort of a very quiet invasion, isn't it? And a lot of people say that this Erdogan and Turkey itself, if you look at the map of the Middle East, some say he's the king of the north. That is mentioned in prophecy, isn't it? Because he is making incursions into the key countries in the Middle East now. He started off with Syria, and now he's in Iraq as well. So there's a lot of headlines out there unfolding. We're seeing Bible prophecy coming to life, and I think this is yet another important development. The final thing is I want to talk about Mystery Babylon. Again, this is a highly controversial topic, and my last video, people start getting heated on there, I could see, and at the end of the day, I know there's people that believe that Mystery Babylon is Rome, some people strongly believe it's Mecca, some people strongly think it's New York, some strongly think it is Jerusalem, and I did the recent one. I said the number 5 candidate, there's many others, but I mean this is the 5th one, is Nahum, the city of Nahum, which is going to be built in Saudi Arabia, and the first phase will be completed in 2025. Now, there's another theory out there which I've left on the back burner for some time, and that is where Mystery Babylon could be the rebuilding of the original Babylon. I mean, just think about it. Babylon throughout history, or Babylonia, and Babylon itself, the whole Iraq, it is the cradle of civilization, and it's also, I would say, the cradle for the, I would say, alternative religions that are basically idolatry based, paganism, that sort of thing. They all stem from that thing, and you see various incarnations of it around the world, but it all started from there. And it is a prime candidate. If that Babylon was to be rebuilt, some say it would take an incredible amount of time to rebuild that place. Well, it doesn't have to be rebuilt as to what it was. It could be rebuilt into sort of a modern day version, something like Nahum. If Nahum is planned to be built and it's going to take 7 years to build, some people are saying it could be built in months. If they really did a concerted effort, it could be built in months. If that was built, would that be the Mystery Babylon that's mentioned in Revelation 17 and 18? Where do I stand on this? I don't know. It could be. There's just a couple of things that don't really fit. Babylon is mentioned, that it's like Sodom and Gomorrah. It was judged, and it just lays waste, and it's never to be inhabited again. But the actual place is not inhabited. There's just ruins there now. But the surrounding areas, around the area, there are people actually there living there. But the actual place itself is just, well, it's just a tourist attraction now, isn't it? It's a historical protected site. But if they decided to rebuild on that location, or maybe just keep that area where it is, keep it as it is, and build a city in that area, sort of bolted onto it, would that fulfill the prophecy mentioned would it fulfill the prophecy mentioned in Revelation? There's a couple of things I think makes it a bit dubious. As I said before, it's never going to be inhabited again. So that's what's mentioned in Bible prophecy, and to be perfectly honest, where the ruins are now, they haven't been rebuilt, have they? But the second thing is, I keep going to this merchants of the sea. These are the people that supply the goods to this city. Yeah, this city, the conclusion I've come to is this thing is, not only is it a city, it is a religious institution that is, I would say, directly opposed to Christianity. That's what I think it is. And also, I think this thing is on the coast, or it can be seen from the coast. Because when the merchants of the sea, they see this thing. They see it from the ships, they see it in the distance, and it's burning, it gets torched, doesn't it? Just like Sodom and Gomorrah. And they see this, and they're weeping and wailing and casting dust on their heads. That's a Middle Eastern custom. Yeah. When you think about that scenario, Rome is ruled out. It's inland, isn't it? Jerusalem's the same, that's inland, and also Mecca is inland, although, yeah, there's quite a way inland, you wouldn't be able to see it. Medina's probably a bit nearer to the coast, but Mecca is quite a way in, isn't it? I'm not sure they would actually see it. But New York, yes, you would see it, because it's on the coast, and also this Nahum would be as well. But this city is quite a way inland. It's about 50 miles south of Baghdad, Babylon, the old Babylon, and it's quite a way inland. The only way you would be able to see it from Iraq, even if you go to the neighbouring country, which is, on the Persian Gulf there, you still wouldn't be able to see it. It's quite a way inland. Maybe a bit of smoke, but that's about it. This city, I think it's on the coast. Yeah. But, again, I could be wrong on this, but that's what I read and what it says in Revelation. And that's my study on this. Iraq does have a role to play. There are events unfolding. It is not one of the countries that's mentioned in the Gog-Magog war, but just like the other neighbouring countries, they're not mentioned either. All the neighbouring countries that are neighbouring onto Israel, they're not mentioned in the Gog-Magog war, but they're going to get sucked in. Yeah. And what we're seeing is Russia. We've got America's in that area. We've got China. They're starting to look at bases around that area. Everybody's starting to get sucked into this Middle East situation. And they all know what's going on, isn't it? There's something prophetic that's going to be happening. Turkey in particular, they're moving down. They're in Syria. Now the latest headline is Erdogan, he's there with his troops. And look at the armbands that they've got on there. Yeah, they are now in Iraq, northern Iraq. Iraq are noticing this, and we're just fighting the Kurds. We're not fighting you. We're not invading your country. We're just fighting the Kurds. But it's a very clever way to move into another country with your military, isn't it? And it's just getting one step nearer to Israel, which I think is the ultimate target. But that's just my idea. So that's just 4 different things that I've seen, over the last nearly 20 years or so, I suppose, really. But ISIS is another one that's really, that's a separate video. I'm not sure I can even make it. It's such a hot topic, isn't it? Probably get deleted by YouTube. But that's it, people. That's what I found on that. Check out the Bible quotes again. Have a look at them. I haven't used the Bible software on this. Yeah, so again, some more jigsaw pieces from the Middle East. Some prophetic jigsaw pieces to add to the puzzle. I'll be looking at other countries in the Middle East, but I think I've covered pretty much the main ones. There's a couple of others I'll be looking at. It's down to you to read the scripture. I recommend you read the whole verses from Isaiah, Jeremiah, these sort of things. Nahum. Read the whole chapters to get the context. Some of these prophecies have been fulfilled, but I think certainly with Nineveh, the prophecy was fulfilled there, but it's just looking like that what's happening there again. You could apply that to the modern times. It's history repeating itself, isn't it, in Nineveh? And Nineveh is basically a suburb of, it doesn't exist anymore, but it's a suburb of Mosul. I think that's an important development, I really do. And also this Erdogan, he's moving into northern Iraq, and he's taking on the Kurds, and the Kurds historically are the Medes. That can be debated, I know, but they are historically the Medes. And you want to just put that in a Bible app and you'll see the history of the Medes, and they have a role to play in prophecy as well. And I'll leave a few Bible quotes at the end of this presentation. And that's it, people. So jigsaw pieces, lots there for you to put together. Form your own opinion. And if you've got any extra pieces, leave them in the comments. Or if you totally disagree with this, which most people seem to most of the time, they've got their own theories or whatever it is, whatever. But the mystery Babylon thing, is it Babylon? As I said in the previous video, it could be Babylon rebuilt. It could be this Nahum that's being built in Saudi Arabia, the northern tip of it, northeastern tip, or northwestern tip. It could be Rome. It could be Jerusalem. It could be New York. It could be Mecca. But as I keep saying, it's in the Middle East as far as I'm concerned. That's where it's going to be. That's where all the action's taking place. And that's where I stand on that. Nothing's changed for this period of time. Rome is a very strong candidate, and so is Mecca. But the one thing I've got to say is all of the mystery Babylons, every single one, if you take, say, 20 points that actually define what Mystery Babylon is, not every single one is going to tick 20 boxes. They won't. They come up about 15. They always come short. There's always 5 you just can't piece. And I just wonder if this Babylon getting rebuilt, that's the one that's going to tick all the boxes. With prophecy, it has to be 100%. There's no point ticking 15, 16, even 19 boxes. If that one box is left unticked, it's not the one. Yeah, so anyway, have fun piecing all those together. And as I always say, keep your eyes focused on the Lord. That's the main thing. That's where you'll get your answers. You'll get your correct answers from there. Have a good Easter, people. And peace, love and joy.